Okay, council, live streaming is all set up.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, it's 3:30, so I'll call this special meeting of council to order. And I would like to let folks know that this is being recorded and will be on the internet. The agenda was circulated. We have two items. One is the official plan and the other is our asset management plan. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Not seeing any. We are not going to be addressing any minutes, nor are there any deputations, nor is there a question period. And we have two municipal reports. So we can get right at the first one, which is the new official plan update from Per. So Per, do you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is just, I'll be brief today. There's a revised draft official plan that's been circulated for review by the townships, the lower tiers. We have to have comments back on this revised draft by the 22nd. So we're just bringing the report forward to council with the attachments that have been forwarded to us from the county. We've looked at the revised draft, and the revised draft included policy wording changes incorporating our comments, our previous comments from March 9th that council was made, or the council was made aware of. There's only a couple of outstanding items, one dealing with some cannabis policies that we'd still like to see some changes to reflect that both cultivation and processing are subject to zoning and site plan control in the rural designation, similar to what's being presented in the draft official plan for the agricultural designation. And then beyond that, there's just a few outstanding land use designation changes to reflect the current zoning of a number of properties, 10 in total, that we're seeing that we'd still just like to see some schedule changes for the official plan too. And then I also made some notes regarding some notable changes that are also reflected in Mr. Brian Weir's report to County Council. He's the director of planning and building with the county. So he notes that some of the broader policy changes that have been made with this revised draft include the 15% intensification target for Lakefield, which translates to 355 units that are required to be built by 2051. There's been some revisions to the aggregate resource overlays in accordance with provincial mapping, the latest provincial mapping, with buffering of 300 meters around lakefront areas, just because those areas are already built up. Oh, and there's also within that sort of aggregate resource policies that they're also proposing changes to the agricultural and rural designation policies that aggregate operations would be permitted as an interim use on those lands without changing the land use designation category, subject to local zoning and site plan control requirements. So there would still be planning approval applications required. You just wouldn't need a policy or a land use designation change from, say, rural to extractive industrial, for example, right? It would be a permitted use within the rural designation. The short-term accommodations policy has been revised slightly. There was some controversial wording. So some people were objecting to it being tied to like economic prosperity. There was some general wording in that regard. So now it's just simply stating that the lower tiers may regulate short-term accommodations through zoning or other municipal bylaws as appropriate for their community, and just leave it very plain wording like that. The natural core area designation policies have been revised to include, as Selwyn Council has suggested or recommended, that after getting a natural heritage evaluation, you wouldn't need an official plan amendment if it's shown that that feature is actually not on that property. It would just automatically revert then to the adjacent land use designation, and you can go ahead and develop on that property without further sort of planning approval kind of thing. You just need to have a report that's been submitted to the Tonopy Region Conservation Authority, and they approve it. They say, yeah, we endorse the report, and the wetland boundaries are adjusted in accordance with the ground truthing that's been done through the report. The natural heritage system mapping has been released, and you can review that. That was part of the package that was provided to council. The implication of that natural heritage system mapping is that on a case-by-case basis, we'll need to evaluate any development proposals on a per lot basis where the natural heritage system is overlaying, to see if there's anything like significant woodlands, areas of natural scientific interest, wildlife habitat, etc. If any of those features are present on the site, you may need to do a further natural heritage evaluation to confirm the presence of those. We can screen at a certain level, at a municipal level. We have some core data here on a GIS. But if we see triggers that we need verification or ground truthing that those features are there, or the extent of those features, it will require a report to demonstrate whether or not they actually are there. And then that may have implications for whether a particular property can be developed or not. And also, just as a bit of a note here in regards to Bill 109, that has the implications of, we had a previous presentation on that, requiring refunds of applications not meeting statutory guidelines for making a decision on them. We were suggesting before that we make peer review a requirement for a complete application. So the county OP has now been updated to include that wording, that we can, if we choose to, at the local level, enact a pre-consultation and or site plan control bylaw changes to require that peer review is completed before we deem an application complete. And that'll help with the process to make sure that we make a decision on that application before our legislative timeframe runs out and we start having to refund money. So it's just an enabling policy at this point that's been included in the official plan, or in the draft official plan. And those are my comments on the OP update. Like I said, we have a draft letter that just basically encompasses our changes in the first part of this letter that we're recommending, and we'll be submitting those by June 22nd.
Thank you, Per. Sherry.
Thank you, Sue. I have a question for you, Per. With the consents or severances, and I'm referring to page 55 of attachment 4, which was the markup version. I would like to know why Selwyn picked the date of January the 1st, 1995. And what that would mean is that the date will continue counting year after year. And right now, if that is the date, it's going to be 28 years from the last application, which leaves us wanting when you compare it to the other townships in the county.
Okay, so through your worship, so I looked into this a little bit through former staff here and also the technical advisory committee group to see what the thinking was for Selwyn Township in regard to that severance eligibility date. And apparently it was chosen as sort of when the official plan project started, it was around 2020. The technical advisory committee group came into effect. So the thinking was just a little bit arbitrary that it was 25 years since the 2020, right? So that's why that date was picked, and largely too that most of the severances for Selwyn Township and Smith Ennismore, the former Smith Ennismore Lakefield, a large majority of those severances were done in the 80s and early 90s. So the thinking was that by bringing it up to 1995, 25 years ago, give or take, at this point, that it would open up the opportunity for a number of new lots to have a severance potential again, right? Being that the majority of the historical severances were prior to that date.
Okay, a lot of the other townships seem to have picked a rolling date, which is 15 years prior to the date of application. And I'd like to put forward a motion that Selwyn adopt that as well, rather than the January 1st, 1995 date. So I don't know if I'd have a seconder for that change.
Donna? Okay.
Yes, I totally support that. That 15 years prior to the date of application seems to be kind of falling in the average of most other municipalities. And I think it would make it fair for our residents.
Other comments, colleagues? Anita, go ahead.
I just want to say that I agree as well. Otherwise, so we have opportunities for growth and severances and not be tied into a specific date.
Okay. And Jerry, sorry.
Thank you. What if we went 10 years? I guess to pair, what's that accomplished for us? Can you, and I don't know whether you could answer this, and it would be purely speculative, but what's 10 years do for us? Do you foresee how many more we might be able to capture or help? They go on about affordable living and affordable housing, I should say. And I've said it once, I'll say it again. If you give somebody a lot, that's fairly affordable. And if you want them living here, it's affordable living. So I guess the question is, can you speculate on how many more that might help and capture?
So through you, Your Worship, I couldn't tell you. It would largely depend on how many people applied for a severance, given a rolling date of what you're suggesting, 10 years prior to the date of application. I would just cautiously say, these are all just proposed dates that are in the official plan, at the draft official plan at this point. Whether the province accepts any of those revisions or not, we don't know. I can say from prior working experience that when I was with the Township of Crammy, their date was in the 1980s, and they wanted to move it forward, and the province wouldn't move it for them. So it remains to be seen, regardless of what date we pick to put in and recommend through the draft official plan, if any of those get accepted. What I can say is to offset that, with the experience of Cavan Monaghan, that did move their date forward quite recently with their most recent official plan update, because they converted a large portion of their lands to the agricultural designations, similar to what's happening throughout the county. And they also made rural severances subject to agricultural severance policies. That was the way they were allowed to move their severance date forward. But having said that, I mean, obviously, if the province does approve, a rolling date of 10 years in our rural designation, it would certainly open up, I'm sure, quite a few more people looking to sever their properties for more lots, right?
Okay. So Donna first, then Gary, then Sherry.
Yes. I like Jerry's idea, but the only thing that concerns me is that, sort of related to what mayor said, if we shave it back too much, then we might get turned down. So that's my only concern about going from 15 to 10.
Okay, Donna, Jerry?
And I agree, that was going to be my point. So I guess my point is, what are we doing here today? If the province is just going to tell us, I mean, we know they hate rural Ontario. So, 15 years, I'll stick with that and I'll support that thing, because this is just a giant waste of time as far as I'm concerned, trying to do something for our ratepayers that the province won't budge on or may not budge on. This is a joke.
Sherry?
Thank you through you. I think hypocrisy reigns here. How can a level of government, and right now I'm talking about the province, be touting affordable housing on the one hand, and then put forward rules and regulations to stunt it by purposely not allowing severance in the rural areas by deeming them agricultural? Even when, in some cases, such as large swaths of Ennismore, you can't grow anything but rocks. We have farmers that are sitting on 10 or 20 acres of land and who would gladly give their children 1 acre to build a home, and they won't be able to because even with the 15-year rolling, there's going to be a lot of it taken out of contention, because once the agricultural mapping is overlaid, it's going to be deemed agricultural. They're not going to be able to sever no matter what the date. I'm really angry about this because we're looking for affordable housing, and the province is saying we're not going to be able to build there. So I think, to be fair, we should put it at the 15-year rolling, and I maintain that as the motion. Thank you.
Okay, and so the motion is to direct the county to change the official plan to have the 15-year rolling. And then it'll be up to the province to either accept or reject as parent. Okay, all in favor? Okay, so we've disposed of that particular item.
Andy, can I ask for a recorded vote on that?
Sure. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Just give me 1 sec here.
No problem. Anita, did you want to comment on this motion, or do you have?
No, I have a question about something else that's on here.
Okay, I'll get to you as soon as we have the recorded vote.
Oh, okay. So we'll start. Councillor Valentine,
Yes.
Councillor Heron. Okay, sorry, thank you. Councillor Locke,
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor Senes.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Okay, so we've disposed of that one. Anita, on another point on the official plan.
Yeah, so this is a question with regards to the addition of growth targets, including a target of 15% intensification within the Lakefield built-up area, which translates to 355 units by 2051. How does that sort of meld with the Lakefield South development? Because 2051 is 29 years from now. So how does that sort of mesh with the Lakefield South development area?
It really doesn't, Anita, because this is the intensification in the existing built-up area, not the Greenfield area, which is what Lakefield South would be. So this is the area, if you look on your map, you'll see that there's a built-up area, which is essentially what's already developed.
Okay.
Not that. Per, I said that correctly, right?
Yeah, you said that correctly. That's what I was going to say. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Donna?
Yes. I'm sorry if this was in the asset management part or in the official plan. It was a lot of pages and I tried to take notes. And then when I was writing my notes, I'm not sure about where this question would be most appropriately asked. So if it would be most appropriate under the asset management, somebody just tell me and we'll park it until then. So I was just wondering how much land has currently been purchased in Lakefield South? How much land is left? And are there any active applications proceeding on these properties? So I don't know if this is appropriate for here or if it's the asset management part.
No, I think it would be appropriate here, Donna, because it's really about land use planning. And so if I understand the question correctly, it's in the area that we refer to as Lakefield South, is there any active applications?
That was one part, yes, of the
Yeah.
question.
Okay, and Per or Robert, do you want to answer that?
So I understand you're asking if there's active planning application in Lakefield South?
That's correct.
Yeah, so we have our Lakefield South subdivision application that's currently underway, right? That would be the major application.
Yeah, and how many, Per, just because I think what Donna would like to know is how many housing units potentially are in that application?
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah, so it's the current proposal as submitted for draft approval is 966 units.
Okay, and only after those units are developed by the developer would they go on sale to individuals to purchase them, right?
That's right. So yeah, so once it goes through subdivision application, it still needs building approvals. And once the building approvals are issued from the township, then obviously there's construction time, and then those units would go for sale. Some of them are single detached homes, there's semi-detached homes, there's some apartment unit dwellings as well.
Donna?
Yeah, I just wondered, is this application a different one from the one that's associated with long-term care? I don't want to really mention names.
Yes, it is.
It is? Okay. And so then how much of the property is left that is not purchased yet? Does anybody know that?
What you're asking is, in the area we designate Lakefield South, is it all held by private sector individuals?
Yes.
I believe it all is, but I'll let staff answer. I don't think we own any of the land as a township, but I may be wrong. Per?
So through your worship, I'm not aware that we have any township owned lands in Lakefield South either. It's all privately owned by either a development corporations or private individuals.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Other comments on the official plan? Not seeing, okay, Donna?
This is the same type of question. I couldn't remember where I read it. And it's talking about the Parks Canada Works Depot north of Smith Street. Should we talk about this in the official plan or asset management? Parks Canada Works Depot.
And what is there a specific question about it, Donna?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead with it.
Is Parks Canada using it, first of all? And if they aren't, would there be a benefit for us in buying it?
Okay, I believe that there has been some sort of discussions on that in the past. I don't know whether Angie or Janice want to speak to that.
Sure, I can speak to that. As we understand it, no, it's not actively in use by Parks Canada, but they are going through a process of trying to determine what the long-term use of that would be. And I do not believe that a sale is part of their consideration.
Thank you.
Generally, what Parks Canada would do is enter into long-term leases for the land. That's generally what they do. if there's to be developed. Okay, other questions? Not hearing any. Just before I move or ask somebody to move a motion, I have my own comments that I'd like to make. So on the plan, well, let me preface it with a question, with a couple of questions. And this is to Robert and Per. In your opinion, is there any of the changes in this plan that will enhance the development of housing in our community?
So I'll take a crack at it first, Rob, but I mean, it's a loaded question because there's several policies on it. I would say for the one policy that is enhancing housing is the third unit policies, right? So we have second unit policies now. We're going to be having third unit policies that we're going to have to implement through our municipal comprehensive review update, right? So that'll enhance housing. The issue here, I think, you know, strictly speaking, from a rural, you know, unit creation through lots, that's going to be significantly impaired, right? Because we're moving a large portion of the municipality into an agricultural designation, which will pretty much eliminate lot creation, right? For at least for residential purposes, right? We'll be left with a rural area that's smaller than current, that will have some increased eligibility for severances, in that we'll be moving from one severance to two severances that are permitted in the rural area. We're also eliminating a policy that you have to have a 20-hectare remnant parcel in the rural area in order to have your severance approved. So that'll alleviate, you know, some restriction. We will also, you know, hopefully be able to move our severance date forward a little bit, as council has made the motion for 15 year rolling date. We'll put that into our letter. It was 15 years. I remember that correctly. Or do we resolve for 10?
No,
Anyway, I'll see the notes. I'll see the notes. But we'll make that recommendation to the county. So there is some increased housing opportunity for the area that remains rural, right? With regard to housing, I mean, we have limited areas that are settlement areas. So by the province's direction, we need to increase development within Lakefield, primarily because it's our service center, right? And to a secondary degree, somewhat in our unserviced settlement areas. Where the issue comes into play in developing those areas is large portions of Lakefield are obviously already developed or have development applications for them, such as with Lakefield South. So then development of new units has to be through intensification. And then realistically, we have to look at, you know, what are the opportunities in the future to 2051 of the number of people that are going to buy lots to increase the number of units, going from single units to semi-detached or even multi-unit residential, right? To increase the number of units within our settlement areas. So is there opportunities for creating housing units going forward? Sure there is. Is it a free for all? No.
Okay, thank you.
I think the only thing, Mr. Mayor and Council, that I'd have to add to that is that part of the growth plan and the other provincial documentation is pushing us towards much higher density targets, which could have the effect of creating more affordable types of housing through density, because obviously there's less land usage, row housing, and the 3-story apartment buildings that we're looking at as development options for that Lakefield South area should increase the opportunities for housing and affordability.
Thank you, Robert. Did I see your hand go up, Tom?
My question was pretty much answered when Robert spoke.
Okay, good. So that was one question. The second question, can a ministerial zoning order be used to expand either a rural or settlement area? They don't call them ministerial orders anymore. There's a new name for it in 109.
Yeah, so actually, I believe actually the MZOs are staying in place, but there's also this new mechanism through Bill 109 for a minister's order that's intended to be used by local municipalities to request that the minister provide an order. I don't see why not. I'd have to review the wording, legislative wording around that, because it reflects back to the growth plan that that the restrictions apply around and the justifications needed to expand settlement areas are within that. But yeah, I believe, yeah, from what I recall from both of those legislative requirements, that could be done. You could request through a ministerial order to expand a settlement area boundary, because it's essentially an OPA.
Yeah, I think you're right, Per, but it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
So, okay, I just want to make a couple comments about the plan in general, and then we can move on. So first of all, I want to begin by thanking all of the folks like yourself, Per and Robert, and our staff that worked on this before, Rob Lemaire and Jeanette, as well as others across the lower tiers and in the county for the work that they've done in producing the official plan, proposed official plan. I'm not happy with everything in it. I'm going to enunciate a couple of things, but I do respect the professional staff who've worked hard to get us to the point that we're at. So I just want to say that. To begin with, I think one of the fundamental issues that we face, and it speaks a little bit to Jerry's point, is that Peterborough County should not be in the GTA growth plan. That's a fundamental error. And as a county, we've gone back to the province with different stripes of government in place and said, it doesn't make any sense. Development in Peterborough County should look more like Hastings, not like King and Bay. And that's a fundamental problem. And some of the rules that we're trying to grapple with, in my view, is like putting a square peg in a round hole. It might make sense in a large urban area, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in a rural area like ours. So I think, to start off with, that's an issue. It's nothing that folks can do about it. We've tried, and we haven't gotten anywhere. The second thing I'll mention is one of the rules under that growth plan is for 40% intensification. That's the standing rule. That's what our official plan, if we were following what the growth plan said, would say. What that means is that the growth analysis indicates, and I'm rounding, it's not exact, about 2,000 new units over 30 years to come into settlement. With a 40% target, that means 887 of them would have to be built in the built up area of Lakefield. Not Lakefield South, that's a separate issue. In the built up area. So if you think of the village and you think of all of the areas that are already built, it calls for 887 new units. Now, the county has gone in, and I support that they've gone in with the 15%, which brings it to 355, but that's still a lot of units to be put in the built up area. It will change the nature of the village. There's no question, it will change the nature of the village. And it's really important that folks understand that that's what it'll do. It does have, as Robert said, provide an opportunity for more housing because of the intensification, but it is there. And so that's, we'll have to, councils going forward, we're going to have to watch that. I believe we're going to have to watch that very carefully. The official plan is 289 pages long. What we've done is the average person it's not a document that they can use. And that's, I'm a little bit troubled by that, right? That it's supposed to be, we want folks to be able to figure out how to develop their property and develop their land. Now, for the most part, you're going to have to hire experts to do it for you because it's become so complicated. Maybe that's the way it has to be, but it's to me it's concerning. The reason I asked the question about MSOs, so the boundary adjustments for settlement areas now are locked in until the next comprehensive, essentially, it could be an exception, but are essentially locked into the next comprehensive plan review. So that's quite some time in the future. Sherry reminds me continuously that it's 15 years since the last time we did this. So that's a fairly long. I was pleased to see, you may recall we had a discussion about an excess lands overlay. That has been put aside, so we're not going to be declaring any developable lands as excess. As far as the natural heritage system is concerned, that does come into play. And one of the challenges is it's not completely ground-proof, right? It's a tabletop exercise. Not all of it's been walked to determine it. Now, they have put a provision in there that if you determine that it was a mistake, you don't have to go through an OPA to change it. And that's a positive thing. And the ag mapping has also not been ground-proofed. And Sherry has brought that up, so it's a bit concerning. Jerry made the point. I think Jerry made the point as well. Yeah, we're relaxing our severance rules or allowing severance rules to create more lots, but then we've turned around and classified a whole bunch of land as ag and said the severance policy doesn't apply there. So with a process which would provide for more lot creation with one hand is being constrained by the other. And I'm not sure whether we will end up with more net opportunities or less net opportunities, I guess time to say. So it's a bit concerning, but I really think that one of the root causes of our issue is that we're governed by the growth plan, and we shouldn't be. And that's point's been made over and over again. So colleagues, I just thought I'd take an opportunity to say those things. So what we need, we've passed a motion to make the change, but we need a motion to receive the report, and it's also, they want this wording, the council provide a resolution of support for the revised draft official plan, subject to the motion that we passed. I guess is the way that we should do that, right? Does that make sense, Angie, that we do it that way?
Sorry. Yes, that's fine, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, is anybody interested in moving that? Anita, seconded by? Jerry, all in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you, colleagues. I don't know how long we'll wait, but there'll be a period of time after this gets submitted before the province gets back to us, I suspect. Okay, asset management plan, which I think Lane is going to speak to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just share my screen here. I have just a brief PowerPoint to go along with the presentation. And could you just indicate whether you can see that on your screen?
I'm good. I can see it.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. So I'm pleased to provide this update to council on the next step in our process for asset management. We're moving along towards our June 29th council meeting date. In today's report, we have a number of more draft sections for council's review. And as I mentioned, these sections are still in draft. I've got this presentation and then can field any questions that council may have. And it's an opportunity really to inquire before the final draft comes forward to council. So I just want to touch briefly on the plan. Of the 9 plan sections, we have 7 completed in draft form, and the council has those before them. Of the other 2, bridges and culverts, the section layout has been completed, and that's been provided to council as well. We haven't received our data yet on the bridges and culverts. Inspections are being completed by the engineer this week. Rick is hopeful that we will be in receipt of a draft report by Monday. And also a references section would still needs to be compiled. That's really just an outline of the main studies and reports that we have used in the creation of the asset management plan. Throughout the document that council has before them today, if you see numbers or sections highlighted in yellow, that's an indicator that there's more work required there. So just as we build the plan together, just to let council know that those are not final numbers for sure. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, of course, once we're happy with this version of the plan, we'll be branding it with the final draft report, page numbers, headers, footers, things like that. I acknowledge that some of the maps that are included are small, and I'm hoping the council can see some of the different colors for the different attributes of the assets. We're considering a possible note or a legend. Typically, those color differences would indicate something like a different road type. So maybe a county road versus a collector road in the township. A surface type difference between asphalt or tar and chip. Same idea for water mains. It could be a size difference or a material type difference. So all of those different colors are included in our CGIS GIS system. And it definitely shows us at a glance what we're dealing with there. With respect to the actual data, we'll be working through the core asset areas to update data and financial information to ensure that the June 28th version is as up to date as possible. One of the key lessons in our training so far for asset management is to maintain a common database. And this is something that we're going to need to work on to coordinate internally and incorporate into our work plans moving forward. Because I can say that we've definitely pulled on a lot of different sources of information. And so we need to get back to kind of one key go-to source of information, one common truth, and that's where we look for our data. CGIS, our GIS system, and the related templates that populate that system will be our spot for consistent data moving forward. And just an additional note with this slide up, we're using the draft roads needs study from 2022 in the asset management report, just to ensure that we're as up to date and in compliance with the asset management regulation as possible. Rick will still need to bring a report to council when the roads needs study is actually finalized. And I would expect that that's probably going to be one of the meetings over the summer at some point in time. As we continue to refine our data over the next few days and week and a half or so, we'll be looking for gaps. And if we find gaps that we're not maybe pleased with, we'll update that completeness and confidence chart, which is included at the end of the document. In addition, as dollar amounts and maintenance dollars are updated, we'll be internally just developing some discussion points about the infrastructure deficit. Next steps is how we move towards the 2023 budget and the first update of the plan. And then from my perspective, even though we're bringing the plan forward in 2022, I would expect by the 2023 budget discussions later this year, we should be due for an update of some of this data. Just a bit of a note too, that considering the addition of some charts and tables, and especially if they convey information better than a series of text paragraphs, to be honest, the report at this point is already longer than I had originally planned. And I think that a more concise presentation would be preferred. So if we can convert some of that text into charts and tables and it's still meaningful, then we'll be doing that as well. And a note about how the plan is built so far. For the most part, we're considering useful life and how we funded that eventually. Looking ahead to future plans, we need to refine our plans so that condition ratings take on more of a priority. And we see this, probably the best example would be in roads. In our tangible capital asset work or in some of our roads need study, we would look at that and say, well, a road has actually fulfilled its useful life. There's no value left in it. The road surface, there's no value left in that, but it actually continues to perform. Still, it continues to do a good job and provide a good rideable surface. So how we make annual updates in a clear and transparent manner is something that we need to discuss in terms of long-term improvements. And we also need to see how our accounting side of the equation, so the historical cost and the useful life there that we figure out for amortization, how that will transfer over to our asset management plan and the useful lives that we use there. So some type of consistency in that as well. In addition to condition ratings, some of the more advanced asset management plans use a risk matrix of some sort. And I've just provided two examples here on the screen. I'm not sure if some members of council may be familiar with this from a emergency management perspective, definitely from a water and sewer perspective. We've dealt with this in the past. But in these two examples, we look at, on one axis, the probability of failure of an asset, and on the other, the consequence of that failure. So if we were in the, say, the bottom left, low probability of failure, low consequence, then that's something that we would likely run that asset to failure and then replace it. So maybe something there, as an example, something that's readily available, and possibly if we have some redundancy built in, say in the sewer system, a blower up at the lagoon would probably be the best example there. We have 3 blowers up the lagoon. As long as we do have PUS do our annual maintenance, all the things that we need to do there, even though we're getting close to a useful life, we maybe would plan on that a little bit more, have a little bit more information from our suppliers, but there's a good chance that we may actually operate that right to failure before we replace it. On the other hand, if we had something in the top right, that means high probability of failure based on our condition rating and a high consequence of failure, then that's something that we need to give attention to urgently. We need to ensure that that's before council for decision making at budget time. And probably the best example there would be a culvert structure. If we have very limited options to detour, if we have limited options, then that has an impact on the repairs in the area or the transportation of goods in our community. If we have no detour opportunity, then that's even higher on our urgent and needs to be addressed matrix. So that's a bit of an update on the plan, where we're looking at the plan to go in the future. And this slide would be familiar to council. This is just where we are today in our journey, really, in the 2022 asset management plan. We'll be completing the text and updates, I hope by midweek next week, and then we will turn that over to Angie's team in the corporate services department for branding and circulation. And this will be in the agenda package next Friday when it goes out, so council will have the full time to review that. So just please accept my thanks for the attention on the presentation, and if I can answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much, Lane. Questions, colleagues? John.
Yes, this is not really a question, it's more of a comment. The more I read this, the more valuable I can see it being. I know it's a lot of work, but it brings all operations together in one document. And I could see it being a very useful read for a new council member as well. So I think it's great, even though has been and will be a lot of work for staff.
Thank you, Donna. Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I recall correctly, this finalized document, when it's done, has to go to the province. Is that correct?
Actually, under the regulation, we just have to ensure that it's available to any ratepayer that wants a copy of it. But we have to post it on our website. And so in that way, I would expect that I would reach out to our local MSO representative once it's approved and provide them with a link to the website. And that would kind of close the loop for me. It would also, I reiterate in that email that this is really a point in time plan. We will do everything we can to ensure that the plan that's approved on the 28th meets the regulation. And then almost the day after that, we'll continue our updates and updating data and trying to make it better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Other questions? I got a couple of questions for you, Elaine. Right on the first page, you show the population numbers. 18,653 is what Stats Canada said. I'm right, that's just our permanent residents, correct?
That's a good question. I'm not super familiar with the Stats Can process. I believe that that's how that is, although on that same sheet, we do talk about seasonal households. I'm not sure if Angie would weigh in on that.
Oh, thank you. Those are yeah, there's a term for it, and I'll find the actual definition and send it out to council. So StatsCan has that defined.
Yeah. The reason I ask is obviously the what's the right word? The depreciation or the use of our assets is in part dependent on the number of people who live here. And it really doesn't matter whether it's somebody who owns a cottage or somebody who owns a permanent home driving over a road. The impact on that road is the same. And so when we're doing a plan like this, I think we ought to be, when it comes to trying to determine the potential usage, we're basing that on numbers that include seasonal residents. Because if we exclude it, we're going to underestimate usage, and our assets are going to be requiring revitalization sooner than what we had anticipated. So that's the reason for the question. And so and that's if you could get back, Angie, and with the number, and does that make any difference to the asset management plan? The second question was, Sherry and I went through the asset management plan up at the county, and one of the things the county did, not saying it was right or wrong, but they did it, is they were able to say, here is your infrastructure deficit. So if you wanted to bring everything up to an acceptable level, here's how much it would cost you to do it. Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong, when we first did the exercise, it was close to $80 million or something like that. Are we going to see a figure like that as per the township, Lane, or is that not a valid analysis?
I would say on the June 28th plan, council won't see that. I think if we look at our completeness and confidence data sheet that's attached, I just wouldn't feel comfortable, especially when some of our low confidence levels are in the water plant and sewer plant. So we are definitely going to refine the amount that we spend on annual maintenance and construction and our replacement costs, and then I'll have some type of an analysis on that, but I don't want to present the council a large scary figure just to present it. So I would say at this stage, no. Maybe at some stage in the future, but definitely by 2025, when we actually have to put together a financial strategy on how we're going to accomplish it.
that'll be a responsibility for the next council. One of the things I noticed as well in comparing it to the county was the fact that we're actually a little bit more complex in the sense that we have to deal with a couple of classes, significant classes, which you've already mentioned in terms of water and wastewater that the county doesn't have to deal with. And so you actually have a somewhat more complex job to do than the upper tier in this particular case, because unless I'm mistaken, I don't believe they have any water or wastewater responsibilities, do they?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, that they do not, and definitely, and that is where the intricacy of that asset comes into play when you get into the water treatment plant. And I guess the other is to have a meaningful financial contribution when you're looking at assets that maybe have a useful life of 60 years, 100 years, those types of things. So yeah, definitely that brings the complexity to our plan, indeed.
When it comes to the water, as a council, we have personal responsibility, if I understand the Clean Water Act, for those assets. Does that personal responsibility get reflected in the asset management plan, or is it just sitting there?
It may transfer through the asset management plan, but I would say that the legislation related to the drinking water regulations would probably reside there instead. So that's kind of a key reason that we have our references section included in there.
Okay, because there is significant ramifications if an individual council doesn't ensure that part of the asset management plan is kept in a state of so that it's in, I might get this wrong, but you're going to want it in the lower right-hand quadrant, right?
Yeah, probably even lower left hand quadrant. Yeah,
Lower,
yeah.
Lower left. Okay. On the page, and pages aren't numbered when I printed it out, and that might be my fault. But if you go into the report, you have a section called water distribution, and then it has right under it summary of assets, then it has Lakefield and Woodland Acres under that. And if you have access to the report, Lean, you referred to the Lakefield water system as being operated and managed under a contract with Peterborough Utility Services. And then you have the Woodland Acres being managed by the Peterborough Utilities Commission. And are those two separate legal entities?
Yeah, so I think the differentiation there, and so I can clarify that, but we definitely have a contract to operate our system with PUS, and they are the accredited operating authority. Under Woodland Acres, that's speaking about the water system, and it is actually Peterborough Utilities that operates the water treatment plant as to where the water comes from. But we should maybe clarify that in that our distribution system is managed by the same company as above.
Yeah,
So,
because it says they own it, which the commission, but it also intimates that they operate it when in fact it's US that operates it.
yeah, so I can make sure that gets clarified, and I think it is the differentiation between where the water comes from and then the distribution system itself. I can definitely clarify that.
And maybe Janice can answer this one. At some point, we accepted as a council a consultant's report that looked at the operation of our water system, and we were going to be looking at whether it made sense to renew a contract or to go in a different direction. At some point, that was going to come back to council, and if it has, I've forgotten. But is that going to come back as part of this or at some point in time?
Not really as part of the asset management plan, and no, you haven't forgotten. So yes, we did have that report, and yeah, kind of in the mix of all of that work, the city is doing a review of how they manage water and wastewater services, and that may have an impact on our ability to continue with the agreement that we currently have with Peterborough Utilities. So we really have been hoping to have the results of that study, so we really have a good sense of what our options are. But that for sure is in the works, and we'll come back to council.
Okay. And I just checking through my notes. Okay. Again, I don't have the page number, but you refer to stormwater collection ponds, and you list 7 ponds. Are those ones that we as a township own? Because it just seems to me there's a lot more than 7 stormwater collection ponds in the township.
Yes, you, Mr. Mayor, those are the ones in our last study that we had outlined that are our responsibility that we have assumed. There are several other ones on some other subdivisions that have not yet been assumed, or they are common lot or common land condominiums.
So is that the practice, is that the developer bills it and then we take responsibility for it once it's done?
If it benefits other infrastructure that's going to come into municipal ownership, then that is the case. That's right. So it's the conveyance, basically a contributed asset that comes over from the developer when the subdivision is completed.
Okay. That makes sense. And the only other thing I wanted to know, and then it was just, I did the math on it and I didn't realize, but almost 19% of Selwyn residents have water and sewer between the two systems. That's quite a bit. That's a big asset for us to manage. Okay, that was my questions. Anybody else have anything? So if I understand correctly, Lane, you just want us to receive this and you'll incorporate this data and be back at our council meeting on the 28th, correct?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay, somebody want to move to receive that? Sherry, seconded by Donna. All those in favor? Okay, and colleagues, I believe that concludes the business of the day, unless Angie wants to correct me. She is going to tell me, though, that we do need a confirming bylaw.
That's right.
So does somebody want to move that? Anita and Donna, and adjournment. Jerry and Anita, all in favor. Thank you, colleagues. We convene again on Tuesday. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, staff.